How do you write horror fiction that is scary, hooks your readers, and is compelling? I have liked horror for as long as I remember, but I was always too scared to write horror stories. For the past years, I was haunted by a horror story I had yet to write, and I finally trusted myself enough to write it. Here is how I did it. Hi everyone, if you're new here, I'm Aude, a writer and filmmaker. I have published novels and short stories over the years in French and English. Today, to celebrate Halloween, one of my favorite seasons, I will share with you the essential tips to write a good horror story. I'm currently working on a horror short film that will hopefully one day turn into a feature. I can't tell you anything about it for now, but what I will do today is showing you how I wrote my horror story and the tips you need to use in order to write yours. Although I've been a professional writer for decades, writing horror for the first time felt very much out of my comfort zone. I've loved films like Wreck and The Cabin in the Woods, or novels like Carrie and R. Stein's Goosebumps. A couple of months ago, however, I realized that I've been carrying a story in my head for years, a story that was very much a horror one. And although it felt natural to dream about that story, I was afraid of getting it all wrong once I started writing it. Here's what I did, however, to get over my fears, pun intended, and create a solid horror story. First, define your themes. The first thing I did was to think about the themes I wanted to explore. I knew I had to write horror, but somehow it made sense to set it in the past. Don't ask me why. I don't even like period dramas like that. I wanted to explore body horror and the deep fear of losing parts of oneself. Horror stories more often than not have something to say about who we are, the world we live in. In Carrie, Stephen King wanted to explore ostracism, religious household, abuse, teen bullying. Writers usually portray the character's internal fears in a visual way by using visual outside threats as a personification of his internal fears. In order to find out what these fears are, ask yourself these questions. What is your character the most afraid of? What is it that you want to tell the world? What do you want them to start thinking and reflecting on? Horror is so good because it creates strong emotional responses, anchor visual images in your memory, and has solid, sometimes controversial societal messages. Next, pick your type of horror. Next is something that I do naturally, but you might be different. You need to pick what kind of horror story you want to write. There are multiple genres you can select at core: psychological horror, historical horror, gothic fiction, slashes, psychological horror. Again, any kind you want. Although I like gore, I didn't feel like I would do it justice, so I picked psychological horror, which is a genre I appreciate very well. Since I already write psychological fiction, it felt natural to me to build the horror elements around the psychological themes I wanted to explore. Pacing. Pacing is everything in horror. No matter how violent or hardcore a slasher is, you can simply write a 200 pages novel with people being killed and dismembered in incredibly violent ways at each page. Similarly, if you write a slasher, you need to add moments of rest, moments where the characters learn more about each other, even funny moments or moments where they investigate who the killer might be. Going through 2 hours or 200 pages of non-stop violence or gore or being afraid doesn't make for a good story, so you need to pace your story. Next, we have high stakes. One of the elements that made horror so compelling and triggering such strong reactions from readers or the audience is that the stakes are really high. In horror, the characters have to fight to save their lives, save their loved ones' lives, or get revenge after losing a lot, if not everything in their lives. Sometimes the clock is ticking and they have to fight to save parts of themselves or their own body. In my story, the main character has to save parts of herself or else risk losing her livelihood and be ostracized. So one tip is to think about that. What is the worst thing that your character could or should lose, and how will they react? What is their emotional response? What action will they take afterwards? The stakes must be high for you as a writer to maintain the suspense and for the audience to remain attached to the character and to worry about the outcome of the story. Will the character make it or not? Another thing that horror writers do to raise the stakes even higher is by establishing side characters that are resourceful, strong, and strategic in fighting the nemesis or fighting the threat that they're facing. So the threat or the nemesis could be another person like in Soul, or it could be a monster, or it could be, a spirit like in The Exorcist or in Evil Dead Rise. And then the strong side character dies and the audience is left worried, wondering if the main character would die as well. For example, in Ready or Not, the character played by Adam Brody called Daniel Lee Domas, who was a great ally to main character Grace, played by Samara Webbing, tragically dies, leaving us wondering if she'll make it. Another very known tip is when writers add loads of injuries to main character, first raising the stakes even higher because we're wondering if they would really be able to survive, because the main characters can't really perform the actions required to survive to the full of their abilities. One great example is Evil Dead Rise, when the main character is injured and gets injury after injury, thus really making the audience worried about her life and if she'll be able to make it. Lastly, unique, strong visuals. One thing with horror is that, unlike other genre, it can be very easily self-contained. Many horror stories, novels, short stories, or films are actually set in one single place, and it works really well. However, one thing that horror relies on, whether it's fiction or a script, is strong visuals. Even if the characters are stuck in one room for the whole story, you have to create an atmosphere that is striking, memorable, and most importantly, creepy. One of the easiest ways to create this kind of atmosphere is by adding objects that are out of place or make us feel uneasy. For example, in Soul, the room that the main character is in is disgusting, and the chains add to the horror since he's stuck in such a grungy place. Plus, there's also that strange bathtub at the back that hides many secrets. Sometimes writers also add objects that will foreshadow the events that are yet to come by placing knives or guns or chainsaws or any other violent tools or strange tools in a place where the action takes place. One way that so does foreshadowing is with a bathtub. Another way you can add strong visuals is through natural elements setting up the atmosphere. Does your story take place at nighttime? Or is it daytime, such as Midsommar, which subverts the genre by creating creepy, chilling visuals in broad daylight? Sometimes writers will use fog or storms or natural elements to create strong visuals. These are all my tools that you need to write a great horror story, and it's right on time for Halloween. So you can write your Halloween story, or you can write any kind of horror story you want even long after Halloween. So what horror story will you write? I'm looking forward to read it, so let me know in the comments. If you like that video, feel free to like and subscribe to my channel for more writing and filmmaking related videos. If you want to support my small business and my work, look at my website as well as my books available on most stores. Thanks for today. Goodbye.